Okay, welcome everybody to Morning Fuel. We're as usual. Your mics are turned off, uh, cameras are turned off. Please put your questions on the chat line. We're very fortunate this morning to have Senator Lankford with us. He's everybody knows that he's one of our two U.S. senators. We're very proud of our two senators. I consider James one of the true statesmen in the Senate. Need more of those. He currently serves on the Senate Committee on Energy and Natural Resources. He has other committee assignments as well. He's the lead Republican on the Finance Subcommittee on Energy, Homeland Security Subcommittee, and includes energy policy in his jurisdiction. He's very important to us. He's very important to Oklahoma. I would like for him to just turn it over to him and let him make a few opening remarks. And hopefully in his opening remarks, he will tell us, start with the story of being at the podium early January when everything happened that was all infamous now. But I'd like for him to tell the story that he told me, and it's very compelling, and I think everybody would love to hear it, James. So take it away.
David, thanks. Brooke, David, it's great to see everybody, and look forward to the time we can all sit down in the same room together and be able to have this kind of conversation across the table and a cup of coffee to be able to chat. Yeah, there's a lot that's been going on, obviously. When you talk about what's happened just in the last few months, most of us would talk not about COVID anymore, but about the transition in presidency, transition in the Senate, that now Democrats have control of the House, the Senate, and the White House. And then obviously what happened on January the 6th as well. Everyone was watching the presidential election, all the different questions and ideas that came up during that time period, all the different challenges on the election. Those all built until December the 14th, when every state certified their election, and that every state chose to only certify one set of electors. So all these questions and all these core challenges all built towards one set of electors from every single state getting certified. And so then it became the challenge of, if anything else is going to get raised at this point, it's going to have to get raised in Congress or in the Supreme Court. Supreme Court pretty quickly said, no, we're not going to take a look at this. If the state certified it, we're not going to do it. And so the only thing that was left was for states to be able to go back and be able to relook at how they would certify their elections. And if there are questions, to be able to relook at that. So we held a hearing. In fact, it was the only hearing on the Hill in the Senate. Ron Johnson and that committee that I serve on Homeland Security, we brought in legal teams from the Trump team. We brought in legislators from different states where there were challenges, and had a whole full-blown hearing. And the emphasis of that hearing was states go back and relook at this and to see if there are questions and challenges, because they have to constitutionally be resolved in the state. Once it actually gets to Congress, if we don't have two sets of electors in front of us, we don't have anything that we can do. We can only choose the set of electors that's in front of us. So we walked through that hearing, no state picked it up. Lots more questions were still coming on the election over the next several weeks. And I had thousands of people that called me from Oklahoma and said, hey, do you see this? Are you hearing this? Are you reading the same things? And of course, yes, we're seeing all the same things. And so a group of us got together and said, okay, let's just ask for a pause on the actual count with all these growing questions. We can't overturn an election. We can't choose different electors constitutionally, but we can ask for a pause in the count to wait 10 days. And instead of doing it January the 6th, do it January the 16th or 17th, and give us 10 days to be able to compile this information and get it back to states, because ultimately states have to decide this. That's the way our constitutional system works. So I step up on January the 6th with the first set of states and to say, hey, let's do a pause on this. We've worked it for a long time. We had built 12 senators total that were going to help us with the pause, and we were going to try to make the case to say, let's just pause this for another 10 days. And obviously, at that time, we had folks that were outside the building that had other ideas about what was going to happen that day. And I have to tell you, when the Trump rally occurred at the White House, there were no concerns about that. Even coming over to the Capitol, there were no concerns about that. I didn't run into anybody that was worried this was going to get violent in the Capitol. We'd been around lots of Trump rallies. Not a single one of them had ever gone violent. Folks show up with banners and flags, and they chant, and they want to be able to be heard. And that is very American. And there were lots of questions to be able to resolve. But no one thought that someone's going to try to invade the Capitol. So we're going through the normal process. I'm stepping up to speak. And as I step up to speak, about 3 minutes in to my speech, where I'm saying to the rest of the Senate, people in my state don't like being told to sit down and shut up. And your concerns are not going to be heard. These concerns need to be heard. I'm looking out of the corner of my eye, and I watched the Secret Service run into the Senate chamber, grab the vice president, take him off the dais, and take him out of side room as I'm speaking. And at the same time, to my left, I see a group of folks grab Chuck Grassley, who's the president pro tem of the Senate, and move him up to the dais. And as soon as he gets seated in that spot, he gavels down immediately and says, "We're in recess." And a staff member walks up to me at that time and says those infinite words, "We have protesters in the building right now." Literally within that moment, when the protesters were around the building, even next to the building, there wasn't a concern. But once we actually had folks on the west side of the building that had literally taken a riot shield and had smashed through a window and had forcibly pushed their way past the Capitol Police and were pouring into the building, no one knew what was going to happen next at that point. This was no longer a peaceful protest where people were going to say, "Hey, we want to be heard." Now we've got people in the building that have smashed their way in through a glass window and then have turned and opened up an emergency exit door in the Capitol. And we have thousands of people that are now rushing in, and no one has any idea who they are, what their intent is, and what's going to happen next. Capitol Police immediately bring everybody inside. The staff members that are around the Senate chamber, they bring everyone in and basically lock down the Capitol, and they determine in this space, we're going to take our stand and we're going to make sure that no one gets hurt inside here. And they did the same over on the House side as well to say there may be protesters in the building. We're not going to worry about the building at this point. We're going to worry about people at this point and to make sure we're protected because no one has any idea what happens next. For about 10 minutes, we stayed in that area. And then they said, we're going to have to move everybody because not only are they in the area, but they're chanting outside, "Where are they? Where are they? Where are they?" It's very particular. They were actually looking for individual members to be able to come after individuals. And now, again, there were lots of protesters in the building that just got there and walked in and they determined, "Hey, this is open. I'm going to come on in." Because the initial folks that smashed through the windows and the doors, they started running around the Capitol, opening more doors to try to get as many people inside the building as they possibly could. So not everybody that's wandering around the building means to do everyone harm, but there were certainly people in the building that had that intent and were verbalizing it over and over enough that it was clear for our security folks that they need to be able to get us out. So they actually cleared a path through the back exit out of the Senate chamber, got us out, and got us over to the building and safe. And within about 5 minutes after we got out of that area, we actually had people that got into the Senate chamber itself and started coming in through the press gallery at the top, where they found an unlocked door up there in the press gallery, came on into the chamber, dropping in, then they started opening up doors in the chamber, and we had folks there. And that's what everyone watched at that moment. We had about the next 4 hours for us just to be able to be together to talk about what's the next steps and where we are and what's actually happening. But it was quite a day to be able to walk through. The American people deserve to be heard. Concerns that people have deserve to be heard. But the way we solve things as Americans is we talk them out. We don't have folks smash through windows and doors and come attack people and determine that's the way that we're going to actually resolve things. We've got to be able to work it out. And so the biggest challenge that we have as a nation right now is making sure everyone is actually heard. And it's one of the challenges that we have right now in the makeup of the House, the Senate, and the White House, because they've determined if you're conservative, we're no longer going to hear you. We're going to try to do everything we can, as partisan as we can, and to see how we can try to do things through the Senate, that there are some vehicles that you can use legislatively to be able to pass things on a partisan basis. But the Senate historically has always been a place where you got to be able to talk it out, make sure both sides are being heard. So they're actually making a bad situation worse by continuing to tell people, "Sit down, shut up. We're not going to hear you. We're going to run all this now." And that is going to continue to make it a very difficult situation in DC. And we're going to continue to be able to press and say, no, there are voices that need to be heard. And the way that we actually determine that is we talk it out right here.
You gave a compelling statement on the floor once the Senate reopened to emphasize those very points. And we really appreciate your leadership. You've been a leader not only when it comes to making certain that the chamber functions as it should under regular order, but also you have taken a really good stance when it comes to we're not in a binary conversation, but there are some who believe that we are binary in every conversation. And it's not zeros and ones. The perfect example of this is on energy policy. When it comes to hydrocarbons versus renewables, oil and natural gas, you and I have spoken about the criticality of hydrocarbons for modern life. And in fact, as we saw during the polar vortex, life itself. So you made some very good statements recently on the critical nature of Oklahoma's oil and natural gas industry and what we provide. You want to expand upon that a little bit and then maybe transition into the discussion about the Congressional Review Act and methane. I know that's coming up very soon.
Yeah, it is. So this has been part of the doublespeak that's coming out of Washington, D.C. Biden talks over and over again about unity and about how we're going to go forward together. And then it has not been that at all. When you nominate somebody like Deb Haaland, who's a very nice person to talk to, but she was one of the protesters at the Dakota Access Pipeline. She drove her car up there and brought food to be able to feed all the protesters and to be able to encourage everyone to be there. She's been outspoken on stopping all pipelines across the country. She's been outspoken on stopping all fracking across the country. She's been very supportive of the moratorium on any kind of expansion, any kind of leasing that's happening on federal lands. There are major problems here and just out of touch with reality, with who we are as a nation and how we actually operate and how important it is to be energy independent. I've said to people for years and years, if we can't provide our own food and our own fuel, we will always be exposed to national security issues. And just at the moment when our nation is truly energy independent and we're buying energy internationally that we want to buy rather than what we have to buy, and we're actually exporting natural gas, exporting oil, the shift that has occurred in the last 10 years on energy policy has been dramatic for us and has been very helpful for our national security. Just at that moment when we're finally hitting a point of energy independence, the Biden team is talking about cutting that off and saying we don't want us to be energy independent anymore. We want to be more dependent for our hydrocarbons from other places, or to be able to expose people in their jobs. Or as Deb Haaland talked about in her statements, that she would say, well, yes, we're going to lose jobs in oil and natural gas, but we're going to open up the CCC, the new modern conservation corps, and there'll be people that will be able to get government jobs to be able to come clean up national parks and to be able to do all this cleanup work around the country. And that will substitute for all these oil and gas jobs. Just made me laugh. I thought there's no 50-year-old roughneck that's out there that's making really good money for his family that's going to leave and is going to go to Yellowstone and pick up trash for $38,000 on a government job and to say that's a great substitute job. That's not what's going on. And so what we're trying to be able to push back is some basic reality. And I remind people what a friend of mine told me years ago, that I tell people over and over again, unless you're naked in a tree eating only nuts, you use petroleum products every single day. What you walk on, what you drive, what the roads that you're on, all the clothes that you wear, the medicines that you take, you're using petroleum. So for folks that are saying they want to just shut this off entirely, are not connected with the reality of what's really happening in the world and the products that are out there and how incredibly important petroleum is to our daily life.
Great. Well, we appreciate you saying that, and we appreciate you being such an advocate on behalf of the industry. Well, let's talk about the federal regulatory agenda under the Biden administration. And from our view, the deregulatory effort under the Trump administration was very well done. We want to make certain that some of those regulations are durable. And the Congressional Review Act, I believe, has been teed up, and you're going to have to deal with that first attempt at reversing some of the Trump agenda in the very near future, right?
We are actually. So Martin Heinrich and Angus King dropped Congressional Review Act request on the methane rule. The methane rule is nothing but trying to clean up conflicting rules on how we actually count methane. Everybody wants to be able to capture methane and needs to capture methane. Everybody gets the importance of it. It's a matter of trying to figure out what's the best way to do it and how to be able to count that, how to be able to track it. That's the biggest challenge that you've had when you're changing out equipment, when you've got a failure in equipment. That's going to happen. We live in a fallen world. Thank you very much, Adam and Eve. So we're going to have problems as we go through everything in life. So when we get to those moments, trying to be able to figure out the metrics of it is very, very difficult to do. And so all the Trump team was trying to do is to figure out, okay, I know everyone wants to capture all these hydrocarbons and sell them at the end. When we have leaks, when we have gaps on this, who tracks it? How is it actually tracked? And do we have conflicting rules on it? They were trying to clean all of that up. If Democrats end up using the CRA to be able to flip this, all they're going to do is cause endless lawsuits and lots of confusion on what the regulatory world is, because they'll take away this one rule, but they can't actually go take away the others. So there's then conflicting rules that are out there and technical guidance that's been done to EPA for previous rules. So it's going to cause just a stir across the entire country of what are the rules and what do we actually live by. So any kind of CRA that we've tried to do in the past and have done in the past have been a clean, this was the rule, we can take this out. When you deal with methane, it's not that clean. And it's not that easy to be able to just say, we're going to roll back to the previous rule, because even the previous rule has been amended before, and there are lots of problems. So we're trying to tell people, okay, I understand your green agenda here, and that you're trying to be able to prove to your base that you're trying to be environmentally friendly. So is everybody in the field. We produce hydrocarbons cleaner and better than anyone else in the world. So we're also trying to be able to do this the best way possible, but we're also trying to keep the country running. We can't just shut down the country in this process and create a regulatory uncertainty. So we'll continue to be able to have those dialogues with folks and to be able to work through this. The chairman of the Committee for Energy and Natural Resources is Joe Manchin. Joe's been a good advocate to be able to say, let's keep things in real life terms, but we're still dealing with, we've got to be able to have all 50 Republicans hold on this issue and pick up at least one Democrat on the other side to be able to stop any of this rollback.
Let's talk about your committees. You brought up Energy and Natural Resources. Finance is a critically important committee. You know, our concerns on IDCs and percentage depletion, in other words, ordinary and necessary business expenses, right, and percentage depletion. Our members, of course, on percentage depletion, at the end of the day, they have an expense, right? They have to go and plug that well and remediate. So talk to us a little bit about how you see the tax agenda rolling forward.
So the Biden team has been pretty careful at this point not to be able to roll out their real agenda on tax. They've just started to lay out, we're going to do a $3 trillion infrastructure package, and we're going to find ways to be able to pay for it in corporate taxes. And they're quietly rolling out kind of one test idea at a time to be able to figure out what they're going to do. I have absolutely no doubt that they're going to come after petroleum when they do all their tax changes. There's just no question they're going to come after that. They've been very clear on those things. And they're going to find a way to be able to increase tax because they're trying to be able to implement the Green New Deal. They've taken the massive Green New Deal and they're trying to break it up into pieces now and to be able to implement it in different pieces and to be able to move it. So I would expect the quote unquote infrastructure package that's coming out to be Green New Deal version 1 of this, and they'll have different versions that they're going to roll out in the days ahead and to be able to break this apart, because there's no way they can have it all at one time. So I would fully expect they're going to go after corporate taxes to significantly increase those. I would fully expect that they're going to go after percentage depletion, and they'll aggressively go after that. I would also expect them to expand all the tax credits on wind, which quite frankly, wind is not a nascent technology anymore. We're not 25 years ago where they're trying to get off the ground. There's no reason to have a $10 billion PTC that's out there for wind. That has literally been the zombie tax credit that we cannot seem to kill. It was supposed to have been gone 3 years ago, and then it was supposed to be gone last year, and then it just keeps reappearing in these mystery packages at the end of each year. We've had only one amendment vote as we're trying to be able to resolve all the end of the year stuff, and it was on the wind PTC when 3 of us went to the Senate floor and said, are you kidding me? Where is this reappearing? When it seems to be every single year we can't seem to kill this wind PTC. Somebody slips it back in again, and it just seems to survive. Wind is doing just fine on its own and doesn't need a $10 billion tax credit. So at the same time, they're trying to go after percentage depletion and normal expensing for any business. They're also trying to be able to expand for solar, for wind, for all those things that are no longer new technologies.
Well, appreciate your leadership on that front. And we know that your colleagues and you are having some significant and serious conversations on these things. So thank you very much for having our backs on that. You just came back from the border. You want to talk a little bit about what you saw down there?
Yeah, I actually came back from the border twice. 3 weeks ago, I was on the Arizona border in Nogales to be able to see the unfinished fence in that area. It is literally, the fence is up. The only thing that's not there are the gates. Because that was the last thing to install was the gates. After they do the gates and get those installed, then they were going to build the road next to the fence. They control it and then put up the lights, the cameras, the ground sensing technology. So you've got this miles and miles and miles of fence and then these big gaps in the gates. And it's just come to a stop. It's just completely nonsensical. They literally have to park a Border Patrol agent in each of those gaps just to sit there all day. Otherwise, there's a huge gap in the fence. And we're not talking open desert in Arizona. We're talking about fencing right across the road from a 450,000 person city on the other side in Mexico. So if this was open desert, it'd be different. It's not. It's right across from a major city. Last weekend, I was down in the Rio Grande Valley. That's kind of the epicenter of the number of people that are moving across the border right now. It also has a problem in the border fence. Same status. They were in the process of building on the fence. The gates are not finished. The technology is not installed. But in that area of Texas, the Trump team was saving money because they were doing the levee construction next to the river at the same time they were doing the fence. So you'd have the levee there, and then on top of that is the fence itself. But that means when they were doing construction and Biden folks stopped construction, they stopped the levee construction as well. You've got 11 miles in that area where the levee is torn out and they had laid the foundation for the concrete new levee, but there's nothing above it. If a hurricane comes through South Texas this fall, then they're going to be completely flooded through that area because they have 11-mile gap in their levee right now because the Biden team decided he didn't want a wall. And so it's really going to cause a major problem in that area. So that's just the wall side. On the people side, we went down on Thursday night late to we're literally watching people illegally crossing the river, and the Border Patrol is standing there just watching it. They have no enforcement authority anymore to be able to do anything about it. If they have a 6-year-old or younger traveling with their group, the whole group is allowed in. And they're saying this is one family group, and that's like a free ticket to be able to get in. The cartels know it. That's the new rule from the Biden team. If somebody 6 or younger is traveling with your quote unquote family group, then you're all in. No one shows ID. There's no DNA testing to verify whether they're all actually a family group. There's just, if there's a 6-year-old traveling with you, you're in. They're literally come across the border. They fingerprint the adults to make sure they don't have an American criminal history. They don't have no idea if they have a criminal history of the country that they're from. And then they're released into the country within 2.5 hours total. So it's less border enforcement than it is more like hotel check-in down at the border at this point. We went to the place where if they're an unaccompanied minor, where they're actually housing them at this point in the Donna facility. It's a giant tent. It looks like if you've ever been to a PGA tournament or something, one of those giant white tents that are out there. They call it the soft-sided facility. That was up in 2019 when the surge happened under the Trump administration. I went down during that time period as well. But at this time period, when I went down there and walked into one of the pod areas where they're holding the kids, I asked the Border Patrol that was working inside, I said, what is this pod designed for? And they said, it's designed to hold 80. And I said, how many kids do we have in this space right now? And their answer was 709. So in a unit designed to hold 80 people, they have 709 in that one little spot. And it's repeated all over that giant tent where they've just crammed people in there and they literally can't move side by side. And many of those kids have been up there up to 10 days in that area because the Biden team doesn't know what to do. And they're locked up in this process because they've invited so many people to come. And guess what? People started coming after they invited them. The crazier thing about it in the Border Patrol, what they're so frustrated with is the cartels are sending all of these kids one direction because they know it'll take a large group of Border Patrol to pick them up. And then 5 miles down the river, they'll bring a large group of adults in. We have cameras down in some of these areas, so we can literally see just streams of adults coming in, but there's no agent in the area because they're taking care of the kids. And the cartels know if I run a big group of kids this way, they won't have enough personnel to be able to stop the adults coming the other way. And so the border is wide open at this point. There are adults streaming in, there are kids streaming in, there's family groups that are coming in, and no one's stopping them.
Well, thank you for sharing that with us. I want to remind our participants that you can ask the senator questions on the chat line. Please do so. And let me tee up what kind of comments you're getting in your town hall meetings and your other visits across the state. I know that we've had necessarily some COVID restrictions that prevent folks from getting together, but talk to us about what you're hearing back from other Oklahomans.
Yeah, it's been frustrating not being able to meet face-to-face a lot. I'll still try to do that. I've been in D.C. a lot more than I've been here. Obviously, there's a lot of issues going on in D.C. right now to be able to work through. This is actually my second week to be in Oklahoma this year. So it's really nice to be able to be in some Oklahoma sunshine right now, getting a chance to see folks. Lots of people have questions about the border, what you've already asked there, what's happening. I tell them that we've got 56 different nations that have been caught crossing the border just in the Rio Grande Valley. People are shocked by that. If you want to know, I thought this was all Central Americans. It's not. It's literally from people from all over the world that are coming across the border and just being invited in. and lots of folks have concerns about that. Lots of folks have questions about this $2 trillion COVID package, quote unquote, that's out there, that people want to know where's all this money coming from and what is this doing and how much of that is actually COVID. About 10% of that bill was actually COVID. Everything else was everything else. So it's pretty sad and remarkable what they're trying to be able to run through and say this is about COVID. We've had lots of questions about the change in voting rules that Democrats are trying to be able to put through right now. You'll hear people talk about what's called HR 1 or Senate Bill 1. That is a really radical shift in how we do elections. It takes away all state rules for elections and federalizes all elections. And though my Democratic colleagues are saying this is all about stopping people from suppressing the vote, let me tell you what it actually is. It changes the Federal Election Commission, which is right now an equal number of Republicans and Democrats. It changes the Federal Election Commission to be headed by who's ever president of the United States. They actually make the rules and they actually do the enforcement. So it changes the FEC from being an equal judge that actually goes through and looks at it to actually being a prosecutor without a judge. That is, whoever's the president's party actually gets to implement and to be able to judge every other election in the country. It also changes the rules for giving to elections, that if someone, let's say, gets $100,000 in donations to their campaign, the federal government, our tax dollars, will give them a 6-to-1 match. So if any candidate for any federal office raises $100,000, tax dollars are given to them for $600,000 for them to be able to go run ads, do whatever it may be. I don't find a lot of people that are saying, I want the attack ads on TV to actually be paid for by federal dollars, but that's what this does. It also takes away all voter ID in the entire country. So our state and our voter ID would be stripped away, and they would say you can't have that. At the same time it does that, it sets up same-day registration. So literally, it sets up a situation where a person could walk up to a polling place, say, I'm not registered here, but I want to register and vote right now. They didn't have to show ID. They don't have to prove residency, but they can show up and vote at that spot. You don't know if they're registered in 2 states. There is no verification on that at all, or if they're registered in 3 states, or if they've already voted in another precinct. They also changed the rules to be able to say you don't have to vote in your precinct. You can vote anywhere in the state that you want to be able to vote. It also expands mail-in voting. It creates something called ballot harvesting, where you could do mail-out ballots to people, and a total stranger could come to your house, knock on your door, say, have you turned your ballot in? And if they've said, no, I haven't turned it in, say, well, bring it out on the porch right now. We'll fill it out together, and I'll go turn it in for you. So political activists can go door to door and harvest ballots and be able to turn it in. Lots of opportunities for fraud there, where people will look at a ballot and say, you voted for the wrong person, I'm not going to turn it in. Or maybe you left a portion of this ballot blank, and so I'm going to finish filling it out for you, and I'm going to turn it in. So instead of you as an individual mailing it, or you as an individual turning it into a polling place, now a third party group can go pick it up. So they can sweep through nursing homes and get ballots, they can sweep through neighborhoods and get ballots, and they can then turn them in or not turn them in as they choose. That is a horrible formula for fraud in all of our elections. Democrats know it, but they continue to say this is about protecting the country from voter suppression. It's not about voter suppression. This is about them trying to be able to create avenues for fraud they can get away with and not get caught.
James, when does our Supreme Court protect our Constitution? I mean, this is just getting beyond crazy.
Yeah.
Beyond, it's the world. I keep hearing people say the world's just upside down.
Yeah.
I mean, this just seems like preposterous things, and it's coming from one voice. There's not any binary conversation going on. They're not listening. They don't think they have to, and they're just changing the rules as they go. It's unbelievable. I'm just very shocked that at some point the Supreme Court doesn't put a stop to this. This is unconstitutional across the board.
So if Senate Bill 1 passes or HR 1, if those pass, the Supreme Court will definitely take it up, because every state attorney general like ours would step into that and would immediately sue and say, you can't take away our voter ID. You can't take away the state's rights to be able to manage their election. That's a constitutionally protected thing. And so they'll step into that and to be able to make a decision. But it's kind of funny. I've talked to several folks that are chatting with some of the Supreme Court justices on this. And the old story from the Supreme Court justices are, don't count on us to be able to fix what Congress did or didn't do. They are a backstop for the Constitution, but we shouldn't count on them. We should stop this before it ever gets to them. So our biggest focus right now is they can't pass Senate Bill 1 unless they change the rules for the filibuster. They know it because there's not a single Republican that's going to vote for that. We all see what they're trying to do on it. They're trying to be able to give Biden and the Democrats long-term control of how they handle elections and to be able to run it how they want. We're not going to ever agree to that, nor should we agree to that. That's a terrible, unconstitutional idea. But they're trying to be able to work and say this is a civil rights issue. You're a racist if you don't support Senate Bill 1 or HR 1. You're only blocking it because you're a racist. And that's just wearing down some of the Democrats that are there to say, I don't want to be accused of being a racist. By the way, I don't either because I'm not a racist. But this is not about civil rights issues. This is about basic voting fairness issues. Everyone should try to encourage every person to vote that's eligible to vote, and every legal vote should be counted. And we want every person to engage in voting. I just don't want people voting twice. I don't want people voting for someone else. And I don't want people voting in a way that we can't even verify if that was actually them that voted. That's not right either.
Well, we're getting some things on the chat line, and I think just generally, and your comments are are right on. That everybody, the goal here is to not lose hope, and so there's a lot of questions about, okay, how good do we feel about 2022? How do we stem the tide of this? It just seems to me that it's just more and more preposterous things are being. I, it just putting a guy on the police reform that Cuomo did. I don't know if you've heard that, but he puts a guy on there that actually executed a police officer in a robbery. I mean, how do you put somebody like that on the police reform board? I mean, it just seems like it's just one preposterous thing after the next from the Democrats, and it's just I don't think all Democrats think like that. I don't think that at all. I did. What is going on, and what's positive coming into 2022? I actually see I think it's a big whiplash is what's going to happen. Everybody's had about enough already, and then we're not even we just got started, guys.
Yeah, we're just a couple of months into this. So let me set a couple of context for you. And I want to drift into a thing that's very personal for me. I'm a Christian. I do believe there's a God in heaven, and he does care about us. And he cares about us individually, not just as us as the planet. He cares about each person individually. And so I do have a lot of hope saying, I don't believe God's like on another planet taking a vacation. I think he's engaged. And so I do pray, and I do get a chance to be able to stay at the work. And I encourage people to say, if your hope is all in government, you're going to get let down a lot. If your hope is in God, you're going to find a very different sense of hope and optimism to be able to get up every day and to be able to get to work and say God's not forgotten about us. So that's for me personally as far as driving my own personal hope and engagement. The other thing is I continue to watch the history. I watched what happened when President Obama way overplayed his hand and did things like Obamacare and the Dodd-Frank Act and dramatically increased regulations. And the American people said, time out. This is not what I wanted. And we saw a massive shift in the electorate where they shifted back over. And we watched what happened in 2010, where the House flipped 63 seats, I believe, just that one year from Democrat to Republicans. It was a huge shift. We have to pick up about 6 seats in the House right now to be able to have Republicans overtake the House. So the House, I think, is the first thing to be able to shift. In the Senate, we have 34 senators that are up for re-election or election in 2022. I'm one of those. 20 of those are Republicans. 14 of those are Democrats. So there are more Republicans at risk there right now as far as running for re-elect than there are Democrats that are at risk. And so we're looking for where we actually going to pick up seats. We've also got some big challenges that are out there. Ohio, Rob Portman is stepping down. Pennsylvania, with Pat Toomey is not going to run again. North Carolina, Richard Burr is not going to run again. So we've got all these different questions that are out there to say, okay, that's going to be a Republican seat in the past. It's going to be open. Those will be very, very competitive seats. Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina are all seats that are purple seats that could flip one way or the other. All of them, we don't know the direction of those and don't know who the main candidate's going to be on that. I'll have a race that's coming up this next year. I definitely hope to be able to win that race and to be able to run through this and be able to continue to represent us in the issues that we have. But all of us will have unique challenges as we step into next year. And we've seen some races that if they didn't get organized early and didn't get momentum early, end up being very expensive races at the end. Again, Tom Tillis in the North Carolina race, extremely expensive. Kansas, that was a race that you would look at and go, okay, that shouldn't be a very expensive race. Ended up being a really expensive race last year because Democrats got organized nationally, brought in a candidate, and it suddenly became a big issue. So trying to be able to win elections early really matters to us.
Well, Senator, you brought up your reelection. So at this point, I want to plug that we are going to hold a fundraiser for Senator Lankford here at the Petroleum Alliance on Wednesday, April 7th. We want folks to show up at that. That time is from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. This will be a great chance to show our support for a guy who has always had our back, who has had to run, it seems like every 2 years for a while, 2014, 2016, and not 2018. Did you have to do that as you had to do that as well?
I had to do 2018 and back up in 2022. But it just feels like it, Brooke.
I tell you what, it was back to back for a while. You felt like you had left the House to rejoin the U.S. House of Representatives and run every 2 years. So we look forward to helping you. Folks, please show up to show support for Senator Lankford and his reelection campaign. We'll make certain that we blast out the updated invite on that. But let's go back to the chat line. We had some questions about vaccine passports. What are you seeing on that? What are you hearing on that?
So the first thing I've heard is what I was afraid of on this, is that colleges would begin to say, hey, if you're going to come back this fall, you're going to have a vaccination. That's really kind of one of those narrow parts of the funnel. There'll be lots of challenges in the days ahead on a legal basis for employers and other individuals to be able to press in and say, you've got to be able to have this vaccine to be able to return to work on that. So I think there'll be a significant number of legal challenges to that in the days ahead. I have said from the very beginning, I encourage people to get the vaccine. I personally had the vaccine. My wife has had the vaccine. Now that the whole thing is opened up here in Oklahoma, that anyone can get it, both of my daughters have had the vaccine. So I encourage everyone to be able to go get the vaccine, but it shouldn't be mandated. That shouldn't be a requirement. For people that choose not to do it, that is entirely their right to choose not to be able to do that. I would say do it because it gives you the freedom to be able to move around, not have to be worried about it. But that's completely within your right to not have to do that. And there should be no way we have a federal mandate to be able to take an injection into your system if you choose not to be able to do that. Lots of folks have got different health issues and different health concerns. There's no way that that should be mandated.
James, I told Rand Paul the other night, I said, how are we going to have a card that says you're a COVID, but you don't have to present an ID to vote? You know, you can't do anything without an ID, guys. This is all such a mystery to most people. It defies logic.
Yeah. Actually, there was a African-American commentator that was on TV a couple of nights ago that said the Democrats, in the way they talk about voter IDs, they talk about African-Americans in the country as people that are not able to go get an ID. So as if we don't have bank accounts, as if we don't drive cars, as if we don't go travel, as if we don't get on airplanes. She said it's so patronizing the way the Democrats talk about individuals that don't have an ID. In Oklahoma, you can show up with a water bill, you can show up with a library card, a social security card, just something with your name on it, but not just walk in and say, my name is John Smith and I want to be able to vote. Is there John Smith on the list today? I want to vote for them. You just can't do that. So having just basic voter ID is pretty simple.
Well, we're hoping that when you start talking about, obviously IDC is a huge issue for us, and Brooke brought it up a minute ago, but percentage depletion, it cannot be a chip in the game. Who it damages the most, producers and marginal well producers, and they need it. They will not survive without it. And frankly, a lot of our production in Oklahoma is marginal from marginal wells. We cannot sacrifice Oklahoma's future by allowing them to change and get rid of or alter any of the percentage depletion. So that needs to whatever war you have to go to protect us from that, do it.
David, it's a good word. I would tell you the Democrats really are focused on finding ways to chip away. If they can shut down every marginal well, if they can shut down every pipeline, if they can stop pipeline expansion or new pipelines, they feel like then time is on their side and they can slowly chip this away. They're literally looking to be able to bleed families and energy policy out and to say, if we can just stop this in the future, then everyone will have to go to wind and solar and other elements. Completely unrealistic. No one looks at the future and says we're not going to use petroleum, because it is literally in everything that we use and everything that we power with energy. And when we go back to the horrible days of negative 14 degrees in Oklahoma City from just a few weeks ago, which seems like forever ago with the pretty days we're having now. When we go back to those very, very cold days, winds frozen up, solar's covered up with snow. We had about 6% hydro in our mix here in Oklahoma, but we were using more diesel powered electricity during that time period than we were wind powered electricity in Oklahoma during that time period. And we don't use a lot of diesel power for electricity, but we were during that time period. A lot of coal, obviously natural gas had its struggles. We can talk about that, but we were able to get that back online to be able to get that going through the hard work of a lot of folks in very cold temperatures, getting all that stuff back online.
One of the folks on our chat line said something along that line. He said, "Look, if if we're going to follow the science, why are we not following the science on how ungreen the windmills are and how subsidized?" I don't think anybody is against not all the above approach. We just want the playing field to be level.
Right.
If you continue to subsidize things that are very ungreen, there's plenty of science and math out there that will show you how ungreen a windmill is.
Well, quite frankly, a windmill doesn't turn without petroleum. There's a lot of petroleum in those windmills.
It doesn't even get built without it.
Correct. Or run from day to day without all the lubricants and without all the petroleum products that go into actually the construction. So yeah, it's a big deal.
Let me hit 3 other questions on the chat line real quickly. Questions regarding Supreme Court packing and the survivability of the filibuster. So can you talk about those 2 things quickly?
Right now, the United States Senate and the future of how we actually operate in Congress, whether it's it forces bipartisan conversations, or this is going to be just the House is exactly like the Senate kind of moment, hangs on 2 people, Joe Manchin from West Virginia and Kyrsten Sinema from Arizona. Those 2 people have been public holdouts on the filibuster. Now, interestingly enough, 2017, 33 Democrats wrote a letter to Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer and said, do not change the filibuster rules. This has been the history of the Senate. We will stand in opposition to any change in the filibuster rules. That was 4 years ago. 33 Democrats in the Senate wrote that letter. All but 2 of them have now walked away from that and said, just kidding, the president's changed. And so now we're going to give up our core beliefs on this. So it's those 2 people holding out to be able to maintain the rules of the Senate. As far as what happens next on everything else, whether it's DC statehood, whether it's changing the rules on voting, all those other policies we can talk about, they're all based on the filibuster going down. We will have dialogue on things and should have dialogue to be able to fix immigration and so many other issues that are out there. But the filibuster holding to 60 votes forces the Senate to actually have bipartisan conversation to find the common ground. That's the thing that's always been unique about the Senate. It doesn't appeal to the extremes of either side. It has to be able to force what's really the American people common ground, and let's do that.
Well, it's 327 of the last 328 times the filibuster was used was by the Democrats. Somewhere that fact has got lost along the way here too.
Yep. Biden keeps talking about it's overused, it's overused, it's overused. Well, the reason it was overused was during the Trump administration, the Democrats used it relentlessly day after day after day. They can't say it's overused by them and then say the problem is it's been overused, so we need to overturn it so we can have it. That's completely hypocritical.
What about OSHA enforcing vaccinations for employers?
So I don't think OSHA is going to enforce vaccinations. I think they're going to try to be able to push through, as they tried to push through over the last year, OSHA rules on how to be able to handle COVID. What we've finally on the backside of COVID, that's an optimistic moment that we've got. We've got so many folks, especially in Oklahoma, that have been vaccinated. And by the way, Oklahoma is way ahead of most every other state. When I travel in other states and other places, you can really tell how far ahead Oklahoma is. Now in Oklahoma, you can literally, any vaccination spot, any person can just walk in. You're not even having to sign up anymore for appointments. Anybody, any age can just walk in and to be able to get an appointment, or to be able to walk in and be able to get a COVID shot. Other states are still like 65 and up with comorbidities, and they're way behind us. But the OSHA was really pushing to be able to have certain COVID rules on how we actually be able to work together. We've been able to push back and say, let's have common sense rules this whole time period, but not have OSHA create this whole set of regulations for something that's passing. But no, we should not have OSHA try to enforce vaccinations on people. because we're back to the same thing. People got lots of different medical conditions or just personal preferences. We shouldn't have to force them for a new vaccine.
Let me hit one more question from the chat line. Does Texas have the authorization or the ability to close its own borders?
So I was on the river actually with the Department of Public Safety in Texas. They have their own basically border patrol that they run the river. The Texas Rangers actually do a lot of work in that area to be able to enforce it. They can only enforce criminal activity. They can't enforce immigration. Immigration is a uniquely federal responsibility constitutionally. But if someone is coming across that river, they can be able to work to be able to interdict them, because it could be drugs, it could be all kinds, it usually is, all kinds of other things as well. And so they can go for criminal actions, but not immigration actions. That's always got to be federal.
Great.
And Bob Sullivan makes a point on percentage depletion and the impact of marginal wells with U.S. energy security. And yes, Bob Sullivan, we'll be pushing some of that information out. Thank you for sharing that. Anything else, Mr. Chairman, that you want to touch on before we begin to pivot and shut down for this edition of Morning Fuel?
Well, I certainly want, and I know everybody shares my opinion of this, but we have to have James Lankford in Washington protecting us and being on these committees. He's risen in the ranks. He's a man of integrity, and we need that. It starts Wednesday, April 7th. We need people to come here. This is like he mentioned, all these races. When somebody's doing the right thing, there's a lot of people going to go after him, and so that we have to arm him. And so the way to arm him is to be involved, be financially involved, and be engaged in this race. So hopefully everybody will come out and support April 7th here at the Petroleum Alliance and James Lankford.
We do have some hashtag James Lankford for president, but Senator, if you would like to make any closing remarks or touch on things that we should have asked you that we failed to ask you.
I don't know that you failed to ask me anything. If you're going to do a hashtag Lankford for president, you're going to have to go through my wife to do that. And believe me, you don't want to be able to have that dialogue. We've watched people run for president. They can't actually represent their state during that time period because they're all over the country everywhere but their state. So I want to represent the great people of Oklahoma and what we're trying to be able to do. I would tell you what the difference that this makes. If we go back 10 years ago, I was first elected in the House of Representatives. I took on as a project at the very beginning, getting the export of natural gas and finalizing our export of oil and shifting that mix over. We chipped away for that for years. It took lots of conversations. When I first came to the Senate 6 years ago, when I walked through the door, I started having conversations with Democrats, and we created a list of Democrats that we thought would actually be movable on this issue of exporting natural gas. And I started one by one going to them privately to be able to talk through the geopolitical importance, the financial importance. All these are folks that are not from states that have natural gas. And so they're like, I don't care. My green folks tell me that this is fracking and is evil. What are we going to do on this? So I went one by one to each of them and worked through the process over and over and over again, bringing facts and figures. Our staff went and targeted them, be able to talk about it. And we chipped away until we got the votes that we needed to actually get that done to be able to export natural gas. I say that to you to say, there's a lot of folks that will say, we'll never get this as we go through Democrats. It depends on if somebody's doing the work. If somebody's behind the scenes, actually doing the work, actually having the conversation, developing the relationships, bringing the facts, being relentless on it, we can actually get some of these things done. It just takes time to be able to move some of these folks. Now, I know our Democrats are becoming more and more left-wing crazy in the days ahead. And privately, some of these Democrats that don't track with all this stuff with the Green New Deal are saying our party's going crazy on us. I can go back to those folks again and again and to say, how do we keep some sanity? How do we keep energy prices low for your consumers? How do we keep energy consistency going on so you don't have massive blackouts and brownouts during high peak times? This is how we can do it. And they will quietly continue to be able to turn, but you've got to be able to be engaged in the work of relationships and of maintaining that and bringing legislative solutions and know how to be able to fight the fight. So grateful to be able to be in that battle and for the favor that I've had with some folks to be able to actually move some things. But we've got a lot more to get done, and grateful in this particular Senate to finally be able to get in a position where I'm on energy and natural resources, the ranking member of the Energy Committee for Homeland Security, which handles all of our diversity portfolio across the entire country, and to be on the Energy Committee on Finance, which handles all the tax policy for energy. So I finally get to be on all three of those committees on energy and to be able to be focused in on, to be able to move some things. So thanks for allowing me to be able to represent us, and thanks for the people that do it well. We do it clean and we do it well, and we are keeping the lights on for the entire country, and I'm grateful for that.
Well, folks, we have a great ally in Senator Lankford. We'll hope you'll join us on Wednesday, April 7th to turn out and make certain that his campaign coffers get full as he enters this campaign year, or campaign cycle, I should say. I want to touch on the Alliance calendar. It is up and it's online. We have the Alliance Open coming up on April 26th. We have our Sine Die event on Cinco de Mayo at the Capitol to celebrate the end of the 2021 Oklahoma legislative session and our successes there. Want to remind you that Lieutenant Governor Matt Pinnell is going to be up on Morning Fuel on April 7th. And please stay in touch. Pay attention to the highlights that are going to be in your inboxes on Friday mornings for new updated schedules and events. Thank you very much, Senator Lankford. Thank you, Chairman Lenormand. Folks, we'll see you at the next Morning Fuel. Thanks for joining us. Keep up the great work, folks.
Thanks, James.
Good to see you all.